Hey there, island dreamers, locals, and anyone craving a slice of paradise. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time, to the Fun and Key West podcast, where the vibe is always laid back, the stories are salty, and the drinks, well, they're definitely frozen. I'm your host, Michelle O'Connor, your unofficial tour guide to the Conquered Public. Whether you're planning your first trip, your fifth trip, or you're just daydreaming about trading the cubicle for the ocean breeze, you are in the right place. Here's the deal. This podcast is your insider's guide to all things Key West. We're talking where to eat, hello, conch fritters and key lime pie, where to drink, spoiler alert, there will be rum, where to stay, and all the quirky, wonderful things that make Key West the one-of-a-kind paradise we all love. Plus, we'll keep you up to date on the latest happenings, festivals, events, maybe even the occasional Hemingway lookalike sighting. And just to keep things spicy, we'll be bringing on some amazing guests now and then, locals, business owners, and people who know the island like the back of their sandy hand. So grab your flip-flops, pour yourself a cold one, and let's escape to the island state of mind together, whether you're tuning in from your hammock or your commute, while wishing it was a hammock. We've got all the Key West goodness coming your way. Thanks for being here. It's going to be a lot of fun in Key West. Let's dive in. Welcome to Historic Marker Monday. Hey everyone, Michelle here with Fun in Key West, and I am jazzed to have you joining me for today's episode. We're taking a stroll down to Wall Street, not just to grab a mojito or two. Nope, today we're stopping at a balcony with a very storied past. You know the one. You've probably walked by it a dozen times without even realizing it's where Jose Marti, Cuban poet and revolutionary legend, stood to rally a crowd of thousands to support Cuba's independence. Yep, it isn't just any old balcony. It's a front row seat to history. Stick around as we dig into the story of Cuban immigrants in Key West, Marty's powerful speech, and how this little island played a big role in the revolution. Trust me, this is history served Key West style. Fascinating, a bit unexpected, and sprinkled with plenty of charm. All right, grab your cafe con leche. Let's dive in. Everybody, this is Michelle with Fun in Key West, and I am so excited that you are joining us for another episode of Historic Marker Monday. Yep, Historic Marker Monday. Did you know that there's a balcony that's very famous that you probably walk by all the time on DeBall Street and you don't even know the history behind it? Well, guess what? We're going to dive into the history of that historic balcony. This is a balcony where Jose Marti, he stood up there and he spoke to thousands rallying for the support of Cubans' independence. So today on Historic Marker Monday, our stop is we are going to visit La Teresa de Marti, which is where that history was made. So Key West, let's look at a little bit of Key West and Cuba for historical context so you understand the impact that this had back in the day. Key West is the closest U.S. port to Cuba. It's only 90 miles from across the Straits of Florida to Cuba. In the late 19th century, regular travel between Cuba and Key West was linked. It was just something that happened all the time. You had cigar immigrants that came in to Key West from Cuba. They wanted to have a better life. They came into Key West. They brought their skills and their talents into Key West and really was the foundation of the Cuban industry within Key West. Perez Cigar Factory was one of the largest cigar manufacturers in Key West in the 1890s. But you got to remember, during this period of time, there was a lot of anti-Spanish sentiment from the Cubans because of the relationship between Cuba and Spain. And so the Cuban immigrants in Key West were sympathetic to what was occurring back home. And so Key West, because of the influx of all of the Cuban immigrants, became a hub for organizing and fundraising and helping contribute to the cause for planning the Cuba Libre, which was the movement to free Cuba. So the owner of the Perez Cigar Factory which was, like I said, one of the largest in Key West in the 1890s, was Teodoro Perez. And this was his house. And I bet you're thinking, I think I know where this is. Hang on, we'll get there. So he had a really big role in supporting the Cuban immigrants as they came in to Key West from Cuba. They were his workforce, but he was absolutely an advocate for the Free in Cuba movement. And part of his political activism was involvement with the Cuban Convention, which covertly supplied funds and arms and logistical aid to the revolutionaries back in Cuba. He constructed his estate in 1892 or slightly earlier. There's some disagreement as to when and where this actually happened, or not when and where, but what time it actually occurred. But it was a grand home, and it still is a grand home, and it faces Duval Street. And he had the factory building built on the back end, and so it was part of Simonton Street. And then he built worker cottages over on Catherine Street. So he had this whole compound going. And there was a lot of similar compounds that were made by other cigar manufacturers. It just made sense. The home, the factory, and then the workers were all together. A lot of them, though, as we know, don't exist anymore because of fires that occurred, the Great Fires. You had some major storms come through, or simply redevelopment. Those compounds were restructured into something else. But Perez's home survives as one of the few that are left that really embodies how the cigar family lived and these compounds were made. So, who was Jose Marti? He was a Cuban poet. He was a philosopher. He was a journalist. And the apostle of Cuban independence. He was born in January of 1853 and then passed in May of 1895. He was a central figure in mobilizing the intellectual and material support for the Cuban War of Independence against Spain. He visited Key West, and there's some disagreement on the exact year he came into Key West. Some say May of 1883, and others reference May of 1892. It really doesn't matter. He came to Key West, and he addressed thousands of Cuban sympathizers from Perez's second-floor balcony, rallying morale and financial support. So you can imagine, as you walk by the house today, you can just imagine somebody standing up there, just rallying the supports, everybody crowded around Duval, listening intently and wanting to be part of what was happening. When somebody stands up in a crowd and starts to speak, we all kind of lean in and we just want to know what they're saying and what can we do and do we support it and all of that. What was significant about this speech is it raised money and awareness among the Cuban expats and local supporters in Key West for what was going on about that Free Cuba movement. It also symbolized Key West's vital role in the independence movement. And it then named Perez's home as La Terraza de Marti, Marti's Terrace. So the legacy and the impact of that whole movement in Key West, you can see a lot of it today. But back then, there was continued fundraising efforts, there were supplies and political advocacy that were raised, and they were channeled over to Cuba through these networks. And Perez and other community leaders sustained the efforts until Cuba's formal independence occurred in 1902. Marti's writings and speeches were impactful and influential, not just with Cuba, but beyond Cuba. It created the framework for independence for all Latin Americans. And his Key West speeches, featured in letters and publications, were circulated among the supporters and were used to help with a lot of those freedom efforts. Local Cuban communities in Key West commemorated Marti's visits with rituals and celebrations, and they named again that terrace after Jose Marti. After Marti's death in 1895, we had events occur like the USS Maine, which exploded in Cuba. You have all of the other issues that occurred But Key West's connection to Cuba's heritage is seen in festivals and architecture and everything that occurs in Key West. You can see back at how it all blends in. Today, so I'm glad you hung on there for what it is. Today, if you haven't guessed it already, this is the site of La Tida, and that is why it's also named La Tida. It took a play on the naming of that terrace and then created the La Tida. It is a historic hotel. You have a restaurant there. You have a piano bar. You have upgraded accommodations that you can stay at. They have a cabaret. The second floor balcony remains architecturally the same. It's been some upgrades, obviously. And so you can envision as you walk down Duval or stay at the La Tida, Jose Marti standing up there giving his speech. I like going into, they've got a very cool bar that overlooks Duval there from the La Tida. They offer a great breakfast at brunch. Mimosas are amazing. You have the piano bar back there. It's a wonderful property. If you get a chance, go check it out. But understand, as we've always talked about, that a lot of these homes offer a lot of historical context to the foundation of what Key West is, its people and who they are. And there's all these stories that can be told. So be sure to check out La Tida. And I encourage you, maybe check out some others as you're walking down Duval, because there are many along the way. You've got the oldest house, you have San Carlos Institute, you have all kinds of stops along the way on Duval Street. If you're looking for more about that self-guided historical marker walking tour, head over to FunInKeyWest.com under what to do, historical walking tours there. It's free. Just stop, look at the buildings. There's a lot of information on the signs. I encourage you to check that out. As always, I'm always encouraging you guys to be part of our book club. It's been a blast. And so you can check out what we're reading now and what we've read in the past by going over to FunInKeyWest.com and clicking on book club at the top, and you'll see what we are all about. If you want to be part of the club and get insights into what's happening and have discussions and meet lots of fun people who have a love for Key West and its literature and history, then you need to be part of the private Facebook group. Yep, you got to be part of that. I am Michelle with Fun in Key West. I am so glad that you stopped by for another episode of Historic Marker Monday. I will get that out. In the meantime, you guys have a great day. Enjoy your Monday. We'll talk to you later. Bye. And that's a wrap on Historic Marker Monday. Thanks for tuning in and strolling back through time with me today. Isn't it wild how you can walk by a balcony on Duval Street and be completely unaware that it once had Jose Marti's rallying for Cubans and thousands of people there to listen? Talk about don't judge a balcony by its rails moment, right? Here's a quick recap for anyone already Googling flights to Key West. History. Jose Marti, Cuban poet and revolutionary rock star, stood on that balcony to rally support for Cuba's independence. Key West Cuban immigrants weren't just rolling cigars, they were rolling up their sleeves, raising funds, and fueling change. And today, Marti's famous perch is part of the La Tida Hotel. Grab a mimosa, enjoy the piano bar, and soak in the history while living your best modern Key West life. Now, here's where it even gets better. Want to take this historic deep dive further? Want to add a little literary flair to your itinerary? I've got a book club designed for history buffs, Key West lovers, and frankly, anyone who loves a good read with a tropical twist. Head over to FunInKeyWest.com, tap book club at the top, and join, and then you'll be invited to join our private Facebook group, and then we can have chats with other fellow island-loving bookworms. Also, while you're at it, like this episode if you're all about blending history with mojitos. Share it with someone who claims history isn't their thing, but you'll convert them, trust me. And let me know if you've stayed at La Tida. Or better yet, if you got your own favorite hidden historic gem in the Key West or the Keys. Whether it's a historic walking tour, a balcony brunch, or pages in a book, keep exploring the treasures of Key West. Until next time, stay curious, keep wandering, and always keep it Key Westy.